You just talk and the JP 8080 will do the rest. The other four, vintage, silky, husky voice, and breakbeats, need you to play the keyboard to actually hear anything. Let's move back to silky and we'll hit right to initialize that. And we should have a nice silky vocoder effect. Silky, silky baby now. Check, check, check. And we can tweak from here. In order to adjust the voice modulator settings, we need to hit Shift and Voice Modulator to select the voice modulator panel. You can see that the two here are flashing, and we're now able to use the front panel to adjust everything that has a blue legend. In other words, all of the knobs that normally are labeled things like rate and depth are now things like noise cutoff and noise level. Let's go through them. Noise level can give you some of that sibilance that can be lacking and sometimes in the vocoder effects, and you can decide where that cutoff will be. Very high, or bring that down a little bit lower, kind of there in frequency there. You can also gate the vocal input so that only the loudest portions will make it through. If you bring that down very low, then even your breath will kind of make it through and get vocoded. If you bring that very high, then only the times when you speak will make it past that threshold. The next three refer to the robot settings, which will add an unpitched robot-sounding voice to the mix. If we grab the robot level knob here and take it all the way to the top, I'm not even holding the keyboard. You don't even have to play the keys. Now that we have an unpitched robot voice, we can adjust it by tuning it, and we can tune it all the way from the bottom all the way up to the top here. And we can also adjust the tone of the robot. To the left, we get more bottom end, and to the right, we get a little bit more better intelligibility. Other knobs available for the voice modulator are effects. You've got your vocal mix, resonance, release, pan, and level. You can also adjust the level of each of the 12 frequency bands that are being used for your voice. Actually, just above the pan knob, we have a really interesting knob that freezes the input indefinitely. Check it out. We'll go into a vocoder effect here, and as soon as I hit vocal hold, it will freeze the input of that mic at the exact time that I hit that button. If we hit it again, we're back to a normal vocoder effect. Now, one more thing we'll need to go over before we move on. There are a couple of dedicated knobs up here that provide quick access to some of the parameters that we've been tweaking. Just underneath the voice modulator label here, you can see there are two knobs marked Control 1 and Control 2 that are quick edits for two parameters of your choice. These two are stored with each performance, and you can freely edit what parameters they control by going to Edit Voice Modulation. Hit Edit and number 2 here, our voice modulator settings, and scroll through until we get to Control 1 Assign. From here, I can just grab any knob or slider that has a blue label. For example, say Robot Control here. As soon as I touch that, it's now been assigned to Control 1. I can now use Control 1 knob just like I would grab any other knob or slider on the front panel, but with one important difference. If I want to change any of these parameters that pertain to voice modulation, I need to make sure that first I'm in the voice modulator panel select. That's Shift and either one of these panel select buttons. If not, then I might be thinking I'm changing, say, the noise cutoff, but actually this knob will be controlling the LFO's rate. These guys function whether I'm in the lower or the upper panel. They function basically at any time. Next up, let's look at filter bank. Bring up user 82 here, filter bank. Now the filter bank can take your external inputs and give you a programmable 12-band filter. You can see that all of these sliders here, from the pitch envelope here all the way through to the amp envelope, they're labeled in blue 1 through 12. So I could take a stereo input and pass it through this programmable 12-band EQ and even store my settings. If you're going for that real lo-fi kind of sound, hit Edit and go through voice modulator number 2 here and scroll through until we get to algorithm. From here you can select between a full bandwidth set of filters or a narrow one to give you that cool radio-like kind of lo-fi sound. If you do a lot of sampling, this is great use of your JP8080 because you can take, say, a sample CD and put it into the external inputs, run it through a performance that uses the filter bank, tweak all of the bands here, and send the outputs into whatever you're using to sample. It's like getting a really cool graphic equalizer for nothing, and it's programmable. Just set up your settings and then store it into any performance you like. Now, the third form of voice modulation we'll go over is morphing.
Hello, tech support.
What is morphing and how do I use it?
In the control section, we have a heading called morphing. Just like the section we did on the JP8000 where we set up the ribbon assign and velocity, we can set up the 8080 to change a whole bunch of parameters. We just call it morphing now. Either when we play hard or soft, that's velocity assign, or when we use an external controller, or actually input from our mic. This is a little convoluted, but I'll do my best to explain. It's not really practical to put a ribbon controller like we have on the JP8000 on a module such as the JP8080. Reason being, on the 8000 we have our hands on our keyboard and the ribbon controller is right within our reach, so we have real-time control of some of these parameters. Now, chances are the 8080 is going to be far away from your keyboard, so that just doesn't really work. So instead of putting a little controller on here that you couldn't reach, Roland has made kind of a more powerful controller named Morphing Controller Sign, and this works basically the same way as our ribbon controller on the 8000. In other words, you hit it once, change all the knobs you want to be controlled by that, and then you hit it again. Now, to control that kind of virtual ribbon controller, you can send it things like Aftertouch and other MIDI continuous controllers, or you can use vocal morphing. Under Edit and number 5 here, that's our MIDI settings here, scroll through until you get to Control Up. Here you decide what will trigger a positive movement of the settings that we just made. So for example, if I hit Control Assign and grabbed the oscillator balance all the way to the left and then all the way to the right and then Control Assign again, whatever I had assigned to move that morph will now adjust that oscillator balance. The factory setting is Aftertouch for a positive change, that's Control Up, and Breath Control for down. Now if we hit number 2 here, our voice modulator settings, and set Vocal Morph Control to on, we can control that morphing with our voice. For an example of this, bring up user performance number 81, Vocal Morph Feedback, and bring a mic into the front panel here and make sure the front button is pressed. And now we can morph this sound by using our voice. Wow, 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 wow. It's pretty cool, huh? And in fact, all of these vocal characteristics that are coming through this microphone are actually sent out of the MIDI output of the JP8080 as MIDI messages. So you have a brand new way to control some of your older synths.
Hello, tech support.
What is individual trigger and how do I use it?
Now, this feature kind of snuck into the JPs without too much fanfare. Chances are your salesperson didn't even show you how to do this. But within it lies some real power, especially for you guys in the dance music markets. Now, normally, whenever I hit the keyboard, the amp and the filter do their things, and whenever I want to re-trigger the amp and filter, I need to re-trigger those keys to let the amp and filter do their things. Well, with individual trigger, I can re-trigger the filter and amp from someplace else. Here's an example. Bring up performance P2 number 47, transmission. This is an interesting patch because when you first bring it up, actually nothing happens. It's actually a split that has an arpeggiator on the left hand that does nothing but trigger the right hand. Check it out. What this patch is actually doing with individual trigger on is that the left hand is triggering just the filter and amp of the right hand. Check it out. Just need to hold down the right hand and there you go. What's actually happening is that the lower section here has an arpeggiator on and the hold button is set for this performance. That means that as soon as I hit any keys on my left hand, that starts the arpeggiator, and its sole job is to re-trigger the filter and amp of my right hand. Check it out. And in fact, I can adjust the tempo. So now that we've heard this effect, let's find out how we can turn it on. Hit Edit and Performance Common here until we get to Individual Trigger Switch. If this is on, then the upper part will be able to be re-triggered. Well, what will it be re-triggered by? In this last example, we were triggering it by the lower keys on our keyboard, but we can trigger it by external note numbers or even, drumroll please, external inputs. You could do a lot with this feature because you could say, take a mic from a kick drum to re-trigger a bass line, or maybe a mic from a lead horn player to re-trigger some synth brass. You can really do a lot with individual trigger. The next screen in Edit shows you what will be re-triggered, either the filter, the amp, or both the filter and amp. And you can then decide what MIDI channel external notes can come from for re-triggering, and also what notes will do the re-triggering. The default is all. Let's have some fun with this by bringing in a drum loop and messing with its re-triggering. Let's go to any performance we like and we'll initialize it so we can start from scratch. Hit Edit and 7, Initialize Utility here, and go through until we have Initialize Performance. Hit Right. Let's set the key mode to split here, and don't worry about erasing anything. This just places an initialized performance in temporary memory. Nothing is written over until you decide to do so. So we have a pretty boring sound up here. But what we want to do now is take both of these panels, both lower and upper, and adjust the oscillator balance all the way to the right. We'll take lower here, take it all the way to the right, and the upper, take it all the way to the right. We just want to be hearing oscillator 2. And we also want to take each of these panels and assign external as our source for oscillator 2. So lower has external as oscillator 2, as does upper. I can now hear my external inputs, but only when I hit one of the keys here. I now have a MIDI controlled gate. Every time I hit a key, I can open up that gate. Now I have pretty decent timing. But I know it has better timing than me, and that's the arpeggiator. So let's set up the arpeggiator to control things. First, go to Performance Common here and go through until we find Individual Trigger Switch. Let's turn that on and set the destination to amp. So we now have our right hand only being re-triggered when we hit our left hand. So what we want to do is turn the arpeggiator on so that these re-triggers happen rhythmically. The only problem is that we need to have the tempo of our arpeggiator be the same as the tempo of our drum machine. I think you know where I'm going here. I'm telling you, you can sync just about anything on this machine. All we have to do is be in Edit, and we'll go to number 5, MIDI here, and set MIDI sync to MIDI in. Then under Performance here, Performance Common that is, we'll get to Arpeggiator Beat Pattern. We have 90 patterns that will re-trigger our external drum loop in time with our external drum loop. All we need to do is make sure the external drum machine or sequencer is plugged into the MIDI in, and it's also sending out MIDI clock. Turn the arpeggiator on and hit hold if you like. That way you don't have to worry about holding down your left hand.